They say never kiss a stranger, but they never told me what happens when that stranger is a mafia boss who vowed his first kiss would be his wife. I thought I was saving my dignity at a wedding. Instead, I accidentally triggered an underworld war, and the prize is me. The story begins with Gabo and Kanza, a couple known back in Kigali for their ambition and undeniable chemistry. Gabo was a brilliant software architect, the kind of man who saw the world in lines of code and logic. When he was headhunted by a global tech giant headquartered in Seoul, he didn't see it as a solo mission. He took Kinza's hands in his and made a promise. I cannot navigate this new world without my soul beside me. Kinza, a rising star in the Rwandan fashion scene, agreed to leave her growing atelier behind to support his dream, believing their love was the only compass they needed. Upon landing in South Korea, life seemed perfect on the surface. Gabo excelled in his role, quickly rising through the ranks of the tech world. Kanza didn't stay in his shadow for long. She opened a boutique in the heart of Seoul, blending vibrant African textiles with sleek Korean silhouettes, becoming a favorite among the city's elite. To the outside world, they were the pinnacle of success. Two Rwandans conquering a foreign land, living in a high-rise apartment overlooking the Han River, financially stronger than they had ever been. But as their bank accounts grew, the distance between them expanded. The conflict didn't start with a loud explosion, but with a slow, chilling silence. Gabo became obsessed with his status in the company, often staying out late for networking dinners that lasted until dawn. Kanza felt like a trophy he displayed at corporate events rather than a partner. Whenever she tried to discuss the loneliness of being a foreigner in a high-pressure society, he dismissed her, claiming her success was proof that he had provided enough. The breaking point came just 2 months ago. Kanza realized the late nights at the office weren't just about code. Gabo had been leading a double life, seeking the thrill of a new relationship with a local woman to validate his integration into Korean high society. The man who once said he couldn't be in Seoul without her had effectively moved on while she was still sitting at his dinner table. They separated, leaving Kanza with a thriving business, a broken heart, and a burning need to reclaim her dignity. If you ever heard about African Korean mafia boss, this story is exceptional. It's going to put you on fire, keep you on your feet. You don't want to miss the rest of the story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment in the comment section where you are watching us from, so we can greet you in our next video. While the world saw a successful Rwandan couple, a shadow had been growing in the corners of Gabo's life. Here is the reality of the betrayal and Kanza's journey from heartbreak to a daring plan. Gabo's relationship with Nessie O, a high-society Korean woman from a family with deep corporate ties, didn't start after the breakup. It had been brewing for 8 months. While Lenza was busy building her fashion empire and waiting up for him, Gabo was already deep in a secret romance. He saw Seo not just as a partner, but as a status symbol that proved he had truly made it in Korea. For nearly a year, he lived a double life, playing the devoted fiancé to Kanza at home while attending exclusive galas and private dinners with Seo. Kanza discovered the truth only 2 months ago, which led to their explosive separation. But the real blow came just weeks later. A messenger arrived at her boutique, delivering a thick, ivory envelope sealed with gold wax. It was an invitation to Gabo and Min Seo's engagement party. Was I ever enough, or was I just a placeholder? How could he plan a wedding while still sleeping in our bed? Does he think I'm too weak to see him move on? At first, a wave of cold disappointment washed over her. She felt discarded, like an old season's collection. But as she stared at the gold lettering, the disappointment turned into a sharp, crystalline rage. She didn't want to go to beg or to make a scene. She wanted to reclaim her narrative. She realized that in the eyes of their mutual friends, she was the abandoned foreigner. She decided to use her greatest weapon, her talent, to change that perception. She locked herself in her atelier for 3 days. She didn't use the standard silks found in Seoul. Instead, she pulled out a rare, hand-woven umutako patterned fabric she had brought from Rwanda and fused it with deep crimson velvet. It was a visual declaration of her roots and her success. Every stitch was a reminder that she was a queen in her own right. To walk in looking so breathtaking that Gabo would realize his status symbol bride couldn't compare to the fire he had extinguished. She wanted to save face by showing the world she wasn't just surviving, she was reigning. She wasn't going to a party. She was going to war, draped in the finest armor a designer could create. The doors of the Grand Hyatt ballroom swung open, and for a moment the orchestra seemed to miss a beat. Kanza didn't just enter. She arrived. Fire in the ice room. Draped in her crimson and umutako masterpiece, she looked like a goddess of fire walking into a room made of ice. The elite crowd, mostly dressed in muted grays and blacks, gasped. "Is that ex-fiancé?" whispered one socialite, nearly dropping her champagne. "I thought she'd be hiding in a dark room with a tub of ice cream." Across the room, Gabo froze. He was holding a glass of vintage wine, ready to boast about his new life. When his eyes met Kanza's, his smug, "I've upgraded" smile slid right off his face. He looked like a man who had traded a diamond for a pebble and just realized it in front of a live audience. Kanza glided through the room, nodding graciously, but internally her heart was doing a frantic Afrobeats drum solo. She saw Gabo whispering to Min Seo, his eyes full of pity and mockery. "He thinks I'm here to beg," she thought. "I need a miracle, now." Panicked and looking for a way to prove she wasn't alone, Kanza turned sharply to her right and slammed face first into what felt like a brick wall covered in expensive wool. She bounced back, nearly losing her balance, and looked up, and up, and up. Standing there was a man who didn't belong in a ballroom. He belonged in an epic myth. He was a colossus. Broad shoulders that looked like they could carry the weight of the city. He stood at an easy 6'4", his chest so thick it strained the buttons of his bespoke suit. When he moved his hand to steady her, his sleeve shifted, revealing dark, intricate tattoos of dragons and tigers swirling around his wrists. He was breathtakingly handsome in a "I might kill you or buy you a continent" kind of way. He had a sharp jawline and eyes like cold obsidian. Kanza saw Gabo approaching out of the corner of her eye, a condescending "Are you okay, Kanza?" forming on his lips. Not today, Gabo, she thought. In a moment of pure, unadulterated madness, Kansa reached up, grabbed the giant's silk tie, and pulled his head down. Before the massive man could even blink, she pressed her lips firmly against his. He went rigid. His hands, which looked like they could crush boulders, hovered in the air. He didn't pull away, but he didn't move. He was a statue in a state of total, catastrophic shock. He stopped dead in his tracks, his wine glass actually shattering on the floor. His face turned a shade of purple that matched the decor. The pity was gone, replaced by a searing, humiliated jealous. Kansa pulled back, breathless, whispered a frantic thank you for the help to the stunned giant, and spun around to walk out with the confidence of a woman who just won the lottery. As Kansa's heels clicked toward the exit, the room erupted into frantic, terrified whispers. Because, while Kansa thought she had just kissed a handsome bodybuilder, the powerful people in that room knew the truth. This was Kang Daeon. To the public, he was a ghost. To the elite, he was the Iron Shadow, the head of the most powerful and dangerous syndicate in South Korea. He was a man who never appeared in tabloids, never went to parties, and most importantly, never touched women. Daehyun lived by a strict, almost medieval code of honor. He believed a man's strength was in his discipline. He had famously declared to his lieutenants that he would never share his breath with a woman who wasn't his wife. He stood in the center of the ballroom, his lips still tingling from the scent of Kansa's hibiscus lip gloss. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, were now burning with a new, dangerous curiosity. He didn't look at the screaming fiancé or the shocked crowd. He looked at his right-hand man, who was already trembling. "I want her name," Daehyun growled, his voice vibrating through the floorboards. "And I want to know why she's not at home waiting for me yet." Kansa practically fell into the back of a taxi, her heart drumming a rhythm so fast it felt like it would burst through her ribs. "Drive, just drive," she urged the driver, glancing back at the glittering lights of the hotel. She felt a rush of manic triumph. "Did you see his face?" she thought, picturing Gabo's shattered expression. She had won. She had saved her face in front of the most judgmental crowd in Seoul. But as the neon lights of the city blurred past, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, prickling sensation on the back of her neck. When the taxi finally pulled up to her apartment complex, Kansa stepped out, reaching into her purse for her keys. She looked up and the keys clattered to the pavement. There, bathed in the amber glow of the street lamps, was a sight that defied logic. A massive, matte black armored SUV was parked directly in front of her entrance, a vehicle that looked more like a tank than a car. Leaning against the hood was him. The mountain of a man from the ballroom. He had discarded his blazer, his white silk shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal tree trunk forearms covered in dark, menacing tattoos of tigers and ancient symbols. He looked like a king claiming a territory. Kansa froze, her breath hitching in her throat. How? It's only been 40 minutes. Is he a ghost? How did he get my address? My lease is under my business name. Is he going to kill me for touching him? Did I kiss a monster? She approached him slowly, her legs shaking like reeds in the wind. She tried to channel the same boss lady energy she used in her boutique, but her voice betrayed her. Who are you?" she stammered, stopping several feet away. "And what are you doing at my house? If this is about the party, it was a mistake. I was desperate." The man didn't move at first. He just watched her with those obsidian eyes, his presence so heavy it felt like the air around her had thickened. Then he straightened up, towering over her, his shadow stretching across the pavement like a dark shroud. "You stole something from me," he said, his voice a low, vibrating growl that made her skin crawl not with fear, but with a strange, terrifying electricity. "I can pay you back," Kanza cried, thinking of her bank account. "Whatever the dry cleaning bill for your suit is, I'll double it." The man took a slow, deliberate step toward her. "You think this is about money? Listen to me, African woman. I have lived a life of violence. I have slept in the beds of many women, but I have never shared my breath. I made a vow. The woman who kisses me, or the woman I kiss, is the woman I keep. That woman is my wife." Kanza's jaw dropped. "Your wife? We don't even know each other's names. I just met you at a buffet." "My name is Kang Dian," he whispered, leaning down until his lips were inches from her ear. "And this is no longer your house. My wife belongs by my side in my home. I didn't come here to talk. I came to collect what is mine." A cold chill ran down Kanza's spine as four more black SUVs swerved around the corner, boxing in the street. Men in dark suits stepped out in perfect unison, bowing deeply toward Daehyun. Before Kanza could scream or run, Daeshan reached out. His hand, warm and massive, didn't grab her roughly. He simply placed it on the small of her back with a terrifyingly possessive grip. "Your things will be moved by morning," he commanded, gesturing toward the open door of his SUV. "For now, you are coming with me. You wanted to save face in front of your ex? Well, you succeeded. Now you have to deal with the man you used to do it." As the door clicked shut and the convoy sped away into the Seoul night, Kanza realized with a sinking heart she hadn't just escaped a bad relationship. She had accidentally triggered a war, and her only protector was the most dangerous man in the country. The convoy pulled through a massive steel gate tucked away in the mountains overlooking Seoul. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of marble and glass, guarded by men who looked like they were carved from the same granite as Daehyun. As the SUV hissed to a stop, Kanza reached for the door handle, her hands trembling so hard she could barely grip it. She wanted to run, to scream, to find a way back to her quiet life of fabric and thread. But before her fingers touched the metal, the door was pulled open from the outside by Daehyun himself. She tried to step out, but a massive arm blocked her path. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "You're entering your husband's house for the first time," Daehyun said, his voice dropping into a deep, melodic command. "In my family, a wife's feet do not touch the gravel on her first night. I will carry you." "I have legs. I'm a fashion designer. I walk for a living," Kanza protested, her Rwandan pride flaring up for a brief second. But Daehyun didn't argue. He simply reached in, tucked one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, and lifted her as if she weighed no more than a silk scarf. Kanza gasped, instinctively wrapping her arms around his thick neck to avoid falling. Up close, he smelled of expensive sandalwood and something metallic like the edge of a blade. As he carried her through the towering oak doors, the sight took her breath away. The foyer was filled with dozens of servants and guards, all lined up in two perfect rows. As soon as Daishan entered with Kanza in his arms, they all dropped into a 90-degree bow. "Welcome home, madame," they shouted in a terrifyingly perfect unison. Kanza buried her face into Hyan's chest, the fear finally paralyzing her. Who are these people? Is he going to lock me in a basement? Gabo, you idiot. Look what your engagement party did to me. Daehyun didn't stop to acknowledge his staff. He climbed the grand staircase, his breathing steady despite the weight he carried. He was a man who had finally captured the only thing his money couldn't buy, the woman who dared to touch him. He reached a set of double doors at the end of the hall and kicked them open. This was his private suite, a space of dark woods, deep firs, and a balcony that looked out over the glowing veins of Seoul. He walked to the center of the room and gently set her down on the edge of a massive king-sized bed. Kanza immediately scrambled to the furthest corner of the mattress, clutching a velvet pillow like a shield. "Listen, Mr. Kang Daehyun, whatever your name is, that kiss was just for show. I didn't know you were this." Daehyun began unbuttoning his shirt, his movements slow and deliberate. As the fabric fell away, Kanza saw the full extent of the tattoos dragons winding down his ribs, ancient script marking his skin. He looked like a masterpiece of violence. "Don't care why you did it," he said, stepping closer. "In my world, there are no accidents. You chose me out of 1,000 men. You marked me. Now I am marking you." Are you going to hurt me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Daehyun stopped. He saw the genuine terror in her eyes, the way her bottom lip quivered. For the first time, the hardness in his gaze softened just a fraction. He sat on the edge of the bed, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I'm a man of my word, Kanza," he said quietly. "I told you that whoever kisses me becomes my wife. A husband protects his wife, he does not break her. You will stay in this room tonight. You will sleep. I will be on the couch. But do not mistake my patience for weakness. Tomorrow, the world will know you belong to the Kang family. And your ex-fiancé, he will regret the day he let you walk out of his sight." Kanza watched him as he walked to the wardrobe to grab a silk robe. She was terrified, yes, but there was something else stirring in her mind, a strange, magnetic pull toward this dangerous giant who spoke of honor as if it were a religion. "Lie down," he commanded. It wasn't a request. Kanza obeyed instantly, pulling the heavy duvet up to her chin. She watched him move across the room, a silent predator turned protector. As the lights dimmed, she realized her life as a simple designer was over. She was now the queen of an empire she didn't understand, married to a man the whole city feared, all because of one desperate kiss. The morning sun hit the marble floors of the estate like a spotlight. Kanza sat at a dining table long enough to host a cabinet meeting, feeling small and out of place in a borrowed silk robe. Daehyun sat at the head of the table, looking sharp in a charcoal suit. sipping black coffee while reading a digital tablet. Without looking up, he spoke with a calm authority that made Kansas Fork freeze midair. "This afternoon, the world will see your face," he stated. "A televised press conference. My hairstylists and makeup artists will arrive at noon. You will be presented as my wife, the new matriarch of the Kang family." Kansas' heart did a somersault. TV? Public? Dacian? I'm an expat fashion designer, not a celebrity. People will ask questions. My family in Rwanda will see this. What am I supposed to say? "You will say nothing," he replied, finally meeting her eyes. "Your presence by my side is the only statement needed. You are the woman who tamed the shadow. That is your role today." Kanza felt a wave of dizzying helplessness. She was being curated like a piece of art for his gallery. She ate her breakfast in a daze, the weight of her new reality sinking in. She wasn't just a mistake anymore. She was a political move. The appearance went better than anyone expected. Dressed in a sleek, structured dress provided by her own boutique, which Dacian's men had borrowed earlier, Kanza looked regal. When they stepped out before the cameras, the flashes were blinding. Dayun kept a firm, protective hand on the small of her back. To the public, it looked like a grand romance. To the underworld, it was a warning. Kanza played her part with the grace of a queen, her Rwandan elegance perfectly complementing his rugged, tattooed power. Across Seoul, in his small office, Gabo watched the screen in haunted silence. Realizing he hadn't just lost a girlfriend, he had lost a woman who now sat on a throne he couldn't touch. "Am not a trophy." After 3 days of being a guest in the Golden Palace, Kanza's restless spirit finally broke through her fear. She found Dahyun in his study, surrounded by monitors showing security feeds and stock markets. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. Dahyun looked up, surprised by the steel in her tone. "Are you unhappy with the silk sheets?" "Sheets? I don't care about the sheets," she snapped, stepping into the room. "Listen, if I'm going to be your wife, if this contract of the kiss is real, then you have to listen to my demands. I am Kanza. I am a designer. I built my business from nothing in a city where I didn't speak the language. I am not a full-time housewife, and I am not a trophy you keep in a box." She took a deep breath. "I'm going back to my boutique. I'm going back to my life. If I can't have my career, then this marriage is just a prison. And I'd rather you just hand me over to the police for assaulting you at that party." The room went silent. Dahyun stood up, his massive frame casting a long shadow over her. He walked toward her, and for a second, Kanza thought she had gone too far. But he stopped just inches away, looking down at her with a flicker of, was it respect? "You have fire," he murmured. I wondered how long it would take for it to return. He turned and looked out the window. "I will not stop you from working. A woman with no ambition is of no use to a man like me." However, he turned back, his expression turning deadly serious. "You are now the wife of the most targeted man in South Korea. My enemies see you as my only weakness. You go back to work, but you do not go alone." "What does that mean?" Kanza asked. "It means," Dahyun said, that from the moment you leave this house until the moment you return, you will have 4 bodyguards at your door. They will be your shadows. They will sit in your boutique. They will drive your car. If a single hair on your head is harmed, their lives are forfeit. Kanza realized this was her new life, a blend of high fashion and high stakes. She was going back to her sewing machines, but she'd be doing it with a small army guarding the thread. "Deal," she said, holding out her hand. Dahyun took her hand, his large palm engulfing hers. He didn't shake it. He kissed her knuckles, his eyes locked on hers. "Then welcome back to the world, Madam Kang. Let's see if Seoul is ready for a designer with a mafia at her back." Dahyun was a man of 2 shadows. To the public, he was a titan of industry, a clean billionaire businessman who sat on the boards of tech giants. To the underworld, he was the Iron Shadow, a man whose mercy was non-existent. He kept these worlds strictly separated, but Kanza was the bridge between them. In his mind, he made a silent vow. "To the world, she is my grace. To my enemies, she is the reason I will burn everything to the ground." Kanza was back in her element, the hum of sewing machines providing a comfort the silent mansion couldn't. She was draping a mannequin in gold-threaded silk when the chime above the boutique door rang aggressively. She didn't even look up. "We are closed for private fittings," she said calmly. "Private fittings? Or are you just too busy spending your new husband's money?" Kanza froze. That voice? She turned to see Gabo standing in the center of her shop. He looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. The sight of Kanza looking more radiant and expensive than ever had clearly broken his ego. "Gabo," she said, her voice cold, "you shouldn't be here." "I shouldn't be here? We were together for years, Kanza. And 2 months after we break up, you're on the news as the wife of a billionaire?" He stepped forward, his face twisting with bitterness. "You played me. You were probably seeing him while we were still engaged. You left me for a bigger bank account, didn't you? You're just a gold digger who—" He lunged forward, reaching out to grab her arm to shake her. Gabo didn't even get within 3 feet of her. From the shadows of the fitting rooms and the sleek corners of the lounge, 4 men appeared as if they had materialized out of the air. They were massive, dressed in identical charcoal suits, their faces expressionless stone. Before Gabo's hand could touch Kanza's silk sleeve, the lead bodyguard, a man named Minho, grabbed Gabo's wrist in a grip that sounded like cracking dry wood. "The madam is not to be touched," Minho said, his voice a low, terrifying hum. "Madam, get your hands off me," Gabo yelled, struggling. "Do you know who I am? I'm her fiancé." "You are a trespasser," Minho replied. With a flick of his wrist, he spun Gabo around. 2 other guards grabbed Gabo by his collar and the seat of his pants. They didn't just lead him out, they launched him. Gabo hit the sidewalk of the busy Gangnam Street with a humiliating thud. His designer shoes skidded across the pavement as his briefcase flew into the gutter. Gabo scrambled to his feet, screaming insults at the glass door, but the guards simply stood behind the window like statues. Every time he tried to step back toward the entrance, a black SUV would pull up to the curb and more men would step out, watching him with cold, predatory eyes. He tried to call her, blocked. He tried to send her emails, deleted by a firewall he couldn't bypass. He even tried to wait for her at the back entrance, but he found a silent man in a suit already standing there, tapping a tactical baton against his palm. For the first time, the reality hit Gabo like a freight train. Kanza wasn't just moved on. She was untouchable. She was protected by a force he couldn't understand and a man who could erase him with a phone call. Inside the shop, Kanza watched through the glass for a moment. She felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of peace. She turned back to her mannequin and picked up her shears. She had a collection to finish, and for the first time in Seoul, she felt truly safe. She wasn't just a designer anymore. She was the woman the Iron Shadow had chosen to protect, and the world was finally learning that some fire was too hot to touch. Despite his power to take anything he wanted in the city of Seoul, Dae-hyun was paralyzed by a single, stubborn Rwandan woman. He was a man used to total submission, yet he found himself swallowing his pride, attempting to win Kanza's heart, with the same calculated precision he used in business only to fail miserably every time. Dae-hyun decided that since Kanza loved fashion, he would buy it all. One Tuesday, Kanza arrived at her boutique to find it completely empty of customers. Instead, the floor was filled with thousands of long-stemmed black roses and a $500,000 diamond necklace draped over her favorite sewing machine. Dae-hyun walked in, looking like a king, expecting a hug. Instead, Kanza looked at him with pure exhaustion. "You scared away my best clients for the week to turn my shop into a funeral parlor?" she asked, gesturing to the black roses. "I'm a designer, Dae-hyun, not a trophy. You can't buy my affection with things you didn't even pick out yourself." He walked out in a silent, icy rage, leaving his guards to spend the night hauling away 3 tons of flowers. He tried to be normal. He booked a private rooftop dinner and dismissed his guards to the floor below to give her space. He spent the night trying to tell her about his childhood, trying to show her the man beneath the tattoos. However, every time he reached for her hand, Kanza instinctively flinched, her eyes darting to the bulge of the holster under his jacket. "How can I be intimate with a man who has a weapon at the dinner table?" she whispered. Dae-hyun looked at his gun, then at her. He realized that to her, he wasn't a husband. He was a walking threat. The dinner ended in a cold, lonely silence. One night, Kanza found him in the garden, his shirt off, cleaning a wound on his shoulder from a business disagreement. She walked over with a first aid kit, her hands gentle as she cleaned the cut. For a moment, the air changed. Dae-hyun turned, his face inches from hers, his eyes softening. He leaned in for a kiss, not a forced one, but a plea. Kanza pulled back at the last second. "I can't," she breathed. "Every time I look at you, I remember I'm here because I'm a debt you collected." He didn't say a word. He just put his shirt back on and walked into the darkness of the house. "I am not your employee." Frustrated and tired of sleeping on a sofa in his own palace, Dae-hyun finally snapped. One evening, he called her into his study. He didn't sit. He paced like a caged tiger. "I have given you everything," he roared, slamming his hand onto the mahogany desk. "I gave you freedom. I gave you protection. I gave you the head of your ex-fiancé on a silver platter. What do I have to do to make you accept me as your husband? Tell me the price, Kanza, and I will pay it." Kanza didn't flinch. She walked right up to him, her small frame standing defiant against his massive chest. "That is your problem, Daehyun," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Stop being a boss to me. I am not one of your soldiers. I am not a business deal you closed. You look at me and you see a wife you acquired. I look at you and I see a man who issues orders." She poked him in the chest right over his heart. "If you want me to be your wife, a real wife, then stop treating me like your most expensive employee. I don't need your protection if it's just a golden cage. I need a man who knows how to be a person, not a mafia king." Daehyun froze. No one had spoken to him like that in 15 years. He looked down at her finger on his chest, then at her tear-filled eyes. He realized that in his quest to own her, he had forgotten how to actually win her. "I don't know how to be anything else," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Then you better start learning," Kanza replied, "before this forced wife decides that even a mafia king isn't worth her soul." Daehyun was a man who could dismantle a rival syndicate in an afternoon, but trying to be a perfect husband was the hardest mission of his life. After Kanza's confrontation, he realized that if he wanted her heart, he had to stop commanding and start connecting. Before the big industry gala, Daehyun began making small, quiet changes that shocked his entire staff. He ordered his men to stay at least 20 paces back at all times. "She needs to breathe," he told Minho. "If I see you hovering, you're fired." Instead of ordering jewelry from a catalog, he spent 3 nights in his study learning about Rwandan's history. He found a small vintage locket and had it engraved with the coordinates of the Kigali neighborhood where she grew up. He left it on her vanity with a handwritten note for the woman who brought her own light to Seoul. He hired a tutor to teach him basic Kinyarwanda phrases. He didn't tell her. He just wanted to understand the rhythm of her soul. The night before the Seoul Global Business Gala, Daehyun didn't summon Kanza to his office. Instead, he waited for her in the kitchen while she was making tea. He looked awkward, standing there in a simple sweater instead of his usual intimidating suit. "Kanza," he began, his voice rough. "There is a gala tomorrow. It's for the legal side of my business, the tech investors. I would like you to be there. Not because I'm showing you off, but because I don't think I can survive 4 hours of small talk without the only person in this city who actually tells me the truth." He didn't order her. He asked her. Kanza looked at him, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. She saw the effort he was making to stay soft when his world demanded he be hard. "I'll go," she said softly, "but on one condition. No earpieces. Just you and me." When they arrived at the World Tower, the atmosphere was electric. This wasn't the underground. This was the world of CEOs and ambassadors. For the first time, Daehyun didn't walk 5 steps ahead of her like a general. He walked beside her, his hand gently resting on the small of her back, not to possess her, but to support her. When a group of wealthy investors tried to ignore Kanza to talk business with Daehyun, he stopped them immediately. "My wife is a more successful entrepreneur than half the people in this room," he said with genuine pride. "If you want to talk about market growth, you should ask for her opinion on the fashion industry." When Kanza looked overwhelmed by the flashing cameras, he didn't call the guards to clear the room. He leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Ni mukomaze, be strong. Kanza's eyes widened. He had learned her language. Midway through the night, he noticed her heels were causing her pain. Without a word to the press, he guided her to a private alcove, knelt down on one knee, ignoring the gasps of the onlookers who couldn't believe the iron shadow, was kneeling and adjusted the strap of her shoe. As the night wound down, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The tension that had defined their relationship for weeks seemed to have softened into something new. "You were actually a human being tonight," Kanza teased, though her voice was warm. Daishan looked out at the lights of Seoul, then back at her. "It's harder than being a boss," he admitted. "But for you, I'd rather be a failing human than a perfect king." For the first time since that desperate kiss at the engagement party, Kanza didn't look at him with fear. She reached out and touched his hand, the one covered in tattoos of dragons, and realized that beneath the ink and the violence, there was a man who was desperately trying to be worthy of the woman who had accidentally crashed into his life. The forced wife was starting to feel like she might actually be home. The air on the balcony had changed. The cold breeze of Seoul no longer felt biting. It felt like a fresh start. Kanza looked at Dehia not as the man who had collected her, but as the man who had knelt in a room full of giants to fix her shoe. "Let's go home, Dayon," Chansa whispered, "and I don't mean to your fortress. I mean home." When they reached the estate, the atmosphere was different. Daishan dismissed the guards at the door with a sharp wave of his hand, not a command for war, but a plea for privacy. They walked up the grand staircase in a silence that was no longer heavy with fear, but thick with anticipation. Inside the master's suite, the iron shadow finally let his armor fall. He didn't turn on the bright lights. He let the moonlight guide them. "Kanza," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he stood before her. "I have spent my life taking what I wanted, but with you, I only want what you are willing to give." Kanza reached up, her dark skin a beautiful contrast against the white silk of his shirt. She began to unbutton his collar, her eyes locked onto his. "Tonight, I'm not giving you anything because of a debt. I'm giving it because I want to see the man behind the ink." The intimacy that followed was intense, a collision of two worlds that had finally found a common language. It wasn't the cold, calculated dominance of a Mafia king, nor was it the hesitant fear of a captive. It was a slow, burning discovery. For the first time, Dahayan wasn't a protector or a boss. He was a man vulnerable in the arms of the woman he loved. And Kanza, for the first time since arriving in South Korea, felt like she wasn't just saving face. She was finding her heart. In the quiet of the room, the tattoos on his skin felt less like warnings and more like a map. A life she was finally ready to explore. The next morning, the sun didn't bring the usual dread of public appearances. There were no hairstylists waiting, no press releases to approve. Klinza woke up to find the bed beside her empty, but the scent of sandalwood remained. She walked down to the small breakfast nook, not the massive dining hall, and found Daishan wearing a simple t-shirt, frying eggs. The sight was so domestic, it made her laugh. "A Mafia boss in an apron?" she teased, sliding into a chair. Daehyun turned, a genuine, boyish smile breaking across his face. "The boss is on vacation. Today, I'm just a husband who's worried his wife is hungry." They spent the afternoon doing something they had never done, planning. They decided that the madam title was gone. To the staff, she was Kanza. The house was no longer a fortress. It was a home where African art began to hang alongside Korean masterpieces. Dahyun looked over her business plans, not to control them, but to offer the genuine advice of a seasoned businessman. He promised to stay out of her boutique unless he was invited for coffee. They spoke about Rwanda. Dahyun promised that their first official trip together wouldn't be for business, but a journey to Kigali so he could properly ask her family for her hand the right way. Months later, Jabo sat in a lonely bar in Seoul, watching a tabloid show. He saw a candid photo of Kanza and Dahyun walking through a park, laughing, with no bodyguards in sight. They looked like any other couple, deeply in love and completely at peace. Gabo realized then that he hadn't just lost Kanza to a rich man. He had lost her to a man who was willing to change his entire nature just to be worthy of her. Kanza had walked into that engagement party to save her face, but she ended up saving a soul. The stranger she had kissed in the middle of a crowded room wasn't just a dangerous mafia. He was the partner she had traveled across the world to find. The story that began with a desperate lie ended with the truest of loves. In the heart of Seoul, the fashion queen and the Iron Shadow didn't just survive, they reigned together.